Hi, I'm Sam Candy. Welcome to Sustain Talks. Today, I'm joined by Richard Betts, Associate Partner in Climate Change and Sustainability Services at EY. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hi, Sam. I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Do you want to start just by telling us a little bit more about you and your role at EY?
Yeah, sure. So, happy to. So I recently joined EY, joined the Sustainability Leadership team about a month ago. And as you said, I'm an associate partner in climate change and sustainability, based in the UK, based in Manchester, actually.
Yeah.
I've been with this sector for a long time, for about 15 years. I worked in London for a lot of years. Then we relocated to Istanbul, and I spent several years in Istanbul where I led the sustainability services there, and then recently moved back to the UK.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about what sustainability and social responsibility means to you. You've been involved in it, as you say, for 15 years, a long time, and I guess it's changed over the years. But what does it mean to you now?
Yeah, so it certainly has. I've seen a lot of change in that time. My focus is really in terms of trying to sort of maximise my impact. I think it's a big move, which I'm excited by, to sort of in terms of sort of impact, considering the sort of moving to having a sort of a positive impact, and I really like the sort of the narrative that goes with that. I think for a long time, sustainability, it's had a problem around the narrative. There's been a lot of there was a lot of sort of focus on the negative side of things, all the sort of dire warnings, and obviously that's part of the story. We can't get away from the fact that we're facing really huge planetary level existential challenges, crises, but I think that's been off-putting for a lot of people. I think it's part of the reason why a lot of people haven't sort of really engaged with the topic. So I think focusing on what we can do and what impacts we can have as individuals, as companies, that's really important. So that's what I try and do, sort of, personal and professional level, looking to see sort of how I can maximize my sort of my impact, my net positive impact, if you like, in terms of what I can do directly and what I can influence.
Yeah. So are there certain things that you do that yourself, or changes that you make, or?
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, well, one recent thing that over the last year or so that I've been doing a lot on is I've been doing a lot of I've ran a lot of initiatives connected to rainforest preservation. I've been sort of actively supporting Rainforest Trust, and I've organised a range of initiatives, events, and so at a personal level, the impact of all of that is that we've managed to preserve secure protection for about 14,000 acres of rainforest. Why did I decide to do that? I mean, well, the science is clear that we have to sort of preserve our natural assets, such as our rainforests. They're critical to all of our futures, and so it shows how sort of everyone and everything is interconnected, really. That the preservation of rainforests in another part of the world, far from the UK, is of critical importance to us here in the UK, and it's everywhere. And it's incredibly cost effective to protect rainforests, and globally, sort of the second largest contributor to the climate crisis is deforestation. It's sort of similar to all of the emissions from the US. So it's a sort of a huge sort of contributor to the to climate change. Also, obviously, to the the interconnected biodiversity crisis. In order to tackle the climate crisis and the interconnected biodiversity crisis, it's essential then that we strive to preserve our remaining natural assets, such as rainforests. So that's something I've been heavily involved with. And I also started a network, and we had initiatives, events in lots of other countries. So that was sort of a way that I tried to sort of maximise my impact, not just directly but also indirectly through what I could influence.
Yeah, I've been following your journey, and congratulations. I know you do so much. What do you think that we can plant enough trees to save the rainforest? I mean, there's let's see, numerous different numbers, but it's approximately 7 million trees are destroyed a day, I think, and 7 million trees are planted a day. So do you think we're really doing enough?
Well, I think in order to tackle these crises, the climate biodiversity crises, on the one hand, there's a need for preservation. We need to strive to preserve the assets that we still have. So the initiatives I've been supporting have been sort of on that side, securing protection for rainforests that are there at the moment. On the other side, it's clear that due to the scale of the challenges, that we need to have a focus on restoration at scale, and restoration can include, in some cases, planned interventions such as tree planting, but then there's also a lot of interest. There's been a lot of interest recently looking at rewilding, unplanned interventions, if you like. So I think clearly there's a big need, as I said, for preservation strategies and initiatives, but also on the other side, restoration. In some cases, they can be planned interventions. In some cases, better to have, let nature sort of take charge, let nature do what it's been doing for billions of years.
Within your role at EY, there must be quite big, serious goals around climate change. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they are?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, I've just joined EY, but yes, that's right. So we do have really ambitious targets, and this is sort of an absolute top priority for us as a firm now, for leadership, the company, and so EY is committed to being to net zero, to being net zero globally by 2025. And to being climate positive by the end of this year. So that's where we'll be offsetting our sort of our emissions, and then sort of going beyond that to sort of remove some emissions from the atmosphere, but then by 2025 to reach net zero. And we've had a target that's been sort of approved by the Science Based Target Initiative.
Brilliant. A lot of companies are setting targets for 2050. That 2025 goal, that's huge. Do you think that if businesses, if people aim for those times, do you think that we can make a real difference to climate change?
Yes, absolutely. So the first comment is, we need to really what the climate crisis and these other sort of big sustainability challenges require of us is to sort of align with the science, because we haven't been doing that by and large. I think in the past, there were far fewer of us, so our planetary impact was a lot smaller. But then obviously in recent decades, with the huge population growth and the huge growth in the size of the economy, obviously now our sort of collective footprint is of a planetary scale, and we're sort of exceeding planetary boundaries. We're at risk of exceeding other planetary boundaries, and so that means that what we sort of were able to get away with previously, we're no longer able to get away with, and i.e. we need to sort of align with the science. We haven't been doing that, as I said, by and large. So we need to align with the science. The science has been telling us that we need to sort of reach net zero globally by sort of, the very latest 2045 to 2050. In order, really that should be seen as a sort of, sort of the minimum level requirement, really, because we've already seen, especially I think over the last 1 or 2 years, we've seen climate-induced sort of disasters in so many countries around the world. So it's really clear that we're already facing a climate crisis. It's here with us now, and that's just with sort of 1.1 to 1.2 degrees of global warming at an average. And so to get to reach net zero by sort of 2045, 2050 means the target there is to sort of try and keep warming down to 1.5 degrees C. But we can see the increased disasters now with less warming. So really, that kind of sort of puts it into some context, I think. But I would hope that as the technologies continue to improve, and they're improving rapidly, as the costs continue to plummet, as they have been doing in the last few years for solar, wind, other technologies, and as there's more and more awareness, as people can sort of, I think make that direct connection with, because I think until quite recently, things like climate change just didn't seem very relevant to many people in their sort of busy, sort of hectic urban lifestyles. It seems sort of something very vague and as if it was a problem that would have to be faced at some point in the future. But I think people are sort of increasingly, realizing that actually, no, this is a problem that we need to face now. We can see the implications now, and so that's sort of creating a, demand for increased ambition. That's putting pressure on companies, on governments, etc., etc. So I would hope that would sort of manifest itself in increasingly more ambitious decarbonisation targets, with these sort of net zero goals, for example, being brought forward. We have seen instances where, like in the UK, for example, where some of the initial targets have been sort of made more ambitious, like in terms of the phase out of internal combustion engines, for example. So I would hope that as the costs come down, technologies improve, and people demand more, we'll see increased ambition. Because really, 2045 to 2050, that's kind of, I would say that isn't what we should be aiming at, because obviously that can only possibly work if everyone everywhere achieves that. Otherwise, you straight away you've got a gap, and we can see the problems now. So I think that's why we should be sort of really pushing ourselves to sort of reach net zero and beyond as soon as possible, and to continually reassess the assumptions and what's possible. So that's maybe that's a bit of a long-winded.
No, it makes sense. It really does. I think like a lot of companies are probably going to think that, we'll just leave it to government, or we'll leave it to the larger companies. Do you think that everyone should be and has to play a part? The smaller businesses, do they need to?
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's right. So I think I think so, as I said, there's been this problem where a lot of people haven't sort of felt engaged, haven't sort of connected with the issue. In some cases, because it seems sort of something that was far away in the future, not very relevant to the here and now, and we have this sort of short-termist sort of mindset, don't we? But I think it is critical to sort of sort of convey the message that obviously yes, these challenges are huge. Yes, we're all part of the problem, but we can all be part of the solutions, and we all have a responsibility to be contributing to the solutions. And obviously, these problems can seem so huge, planetary level sort of problems, that it can seem completely irrelevant, what you or I do or do not do, because we're one person out of sort of almost 8 billion people. But I would say, we should be focusing on what we can do, on what we can change, and what we can influence. It kind of connects to that impact point. because if we think that way, there are many things that we can do, and actually the options are increasing. The costs are coming down for a lot of technologies. There are more and more sort of green products available in supermarkets and other shops, for example. So there are more possibilities. The costs are coming down. There's more and more we can do. There's more and more that we can influence, and that's only going to sort of intensify. And really, maybe we should look at sort of the climate crisis, and in a way, we could even sort of I think we can draw some inspiration from how actually we can have an impact, because you could say if one person drives a diesel car, there'll be sort of local pollution, but there won't be any kind of planetary level impact on the climate. But when many millions of people do that, well, then you have a problem. So you could flip that around and you could say, well, okay, what I do may be irrelevant, but we live in a highly interconnected, networked world where sort of ideas can spread and do spread very quickly. What we do can sort of inspire other people to do similar things. And so I think these things can clearly sort of start to change really quickly. And we only have to look at history, and we can see that arguably all ideas, all changes started with an idea, with an inventor, with a sort of a small group of people, and they grew out from that, didn't they, to sort of become ultimately significant. And I think we have this, as I said, we have this sort of short-term kind of mindset where we sort of we kind of like assume that because things are not changing right now, then things have always been the same and will always stay the same. But obviously when we sort of take stock, and we don't always have time to do that, but when we do take stock, when we look back at history, we can see how much things have changed, and we can see clearly that actually change is very possible, and obviously everything is changing around us.
I think one of the benefits of COVID is that it has given a lot of people the chance to take stock and to really think about their impact and how they want to change their lives. There's been a huge change to travel, to going into offices. So it has. What do you think the biggest challenges are in sustainability?
Well, for me, really sustainability requires us to sort of adopt a new paradigm, a new way of thinking, because our prevailing paradigm and way of thinking is very sort of short-termist, and we've tended to sort of think just about direct impacts, short-term financial returns and costs, and we've tended to think about just some stakeholder groups. With sustainability, really we need to take a systems approach. So all those things that we have been looking at are still relevant, but they're just sort of one part of the picture. So we need to think not just in terms of the sort of the short-term impact, but also the longer-term impacts. Not just the direct impacts, but the indirect impacts, so-called sort of externalities, environmental, social, so indirect impacts, and we need to sort of consider and engage with a wider range of stakeholder groups. So that's I think that's clear that that's what we need to do, but I think that's something that doesn't come naturally for us to do. I think we're genetically hardwired to sort of to be short-termist, I would say, and probably in the past that kind of was a sort of a differentiator. In the dim and distant past, when our ancestors were about to be eaten by a large predator or having to sort of catch their prey, being able to focus just on sort of what was directly in front of them in that moment was clearly an advantage. But now the sort of the risks and opportunities they're more complex. And so we need to sort of think in in new ways. So I think that mindset shift is key, because often you'll hear people sort of saying, questioning like the costs connected to decarbonisation, for example, or protecting nature, and it's because they're only thinking about the direct costs, not all the indirect costs connected to global warming and sort of biodiversity breakdown. And when you look at the system, you can see how, well, it's clear that we're in this, we have to tackle the crisis. There's no sort of alternative. But when we look at the system, we can see how it's not, we see a very different sort of picture in terms of costs.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people still, might not believe that there is a threat, that climate change is as serious as maybe myself and you believe. Do you, what do you think is the biggest threat? I mean, you're in the UK now. What do you think is the biggest threat to the UK?
We've seen clearly in the last few years that there's been record flooding in lots of parts of the country, which has been sort of linked to climate change. Obviously, one of the big part of the complexity with climate change is it manifests itself differently in different places. So as I was living in Turkey, and in Turkey was hit really badly over the summer by unprecedented forest fires, which really, I think, for a lot of people there was perhaps the first sort of time that they could sort of really see the impacts of climate change in Turkey. In the UK, we've had sort of record flooding in recent years. So I think this has been part of the challenge. How can you sort of confront an issue which you can't kind of recognise, which manifests itself differently in different places? Record sort of forest fires in one area, flooding in another area, something else. I think that's a key issue. And in the UK, there have been some alarming studies recently that have been looking at how the jet stream has been weakening, which would sort of have huge implications for the UK and Western Europe in terms of sort of disrupting the sort of the more regular sort of type of weather that we've had, more extreme, more intense rainfall, and so on. In the UK, we're also very exposed to supply chain risks, and we've all seen that recently. With sort of shortages of key ingredients, and for example, so it's clear that we're importing a lot of our food from all around the world, including from many areas where that are under sort of real pressure now from global warming. So that introduces a lot of risk to us in the UK in terms of sourcing and being able to continue to source reliably and sort of affordably key food items.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an interesting year and a half. What have been the most important lessons that you've learned over the last year and a half?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the lockdown, obviously, it's something that I suppose there hasn't been anything really similar that we've had to, the people in the UK have had to sort of face probably since World War II. It's been a unprecedented event, and with unprecedented sort of impacts on our way of life. I think for me, actually, yeah, I mean, it did sort of cause me to reassess my priorities, and perhaps one of the reasons why I decided to move back to the UK. Actually, I think it showed like the importance of place, if that makes sense. Because in in our sort of I was sort of traveling quite a lot as a consultant in lots of different places, and with COVID, obviously we were sort of forced to sort of back to the local area. For most of the time we weren't able to sort of leave the house or just sort of go to places that were nearby, and actually when you think about it, if you look at history, actually for most of history, that's the way that most people lived, isn't it? They sort of they grew up in an area, they stayed with their families in that area, and they never left that area, and they had very strong connections to their surrounding area, always with their with their family, worked with their family, etc., etc. And that's what we did in COVID. So we were sort of with our families again, in a local area, and so that really sort of made me reassess my priorities, and to realize the importance of of place, of family, which were certainly reasons that I decided to move back to the UK. And this sort of love of place, this sort of topophilia, I think it also shows us the way that we can confront the climate crisis, because when we think of what global warming means, it obviously is a threat to our place, our homes, the areas where we grew up. I mean, I grew up in Norfolk, on the Norfolk coast, and when I went back there over the summer, I went running on the beach as I used to when I was growing up there, and that's, even though I've been away from that area for a long time, that's still where my roots are.
Yeah.
And I have like a cultural connection to Norfolk. That's where I grew up.
Yeah.
And that's also an area that's sort of a high risk of from sea level rise connected to global warming. A lot of the Norfolk coast, may be underwater in sort of decades to come. And, yes, there's a lot of work going on to sort of build more defences, but clearly that's a high risk. And so I think you can, we see how climate change, yes, then is this sort of threat to our to our culture, to our way of life, and a sort of the local level. And maybe we haven't kind of, maybe that's something that we didn't sort of really sort of dwell on too much, I think, until quite recently. I mean, I think again in Turkey, it was brought home this summer with the forest fires. That there's a problem here and now, and it's a threat to the the way of life in parts of the country, because up until quite recently, a lot of the images that people had of global warming were of polar bears, struggling in the Arctic. I mean, that's tragic, but that's a long way from where we live.
Yeah.
Or, problems in the rainforests. Again, that's tragic. That's a long way from where we live. And so you realize that the frontiers then of the climate frontiers are shifting. There are still obviously frontiers, if you like, in sort of the Arctic and in the Amazon and in other places that are on the front line. Indigenous communities in those areas that have been on the front line against global warming, but now we're increasingly starting to sort of see this for ourselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen some maps and heard some talks from some towns that could be underwater in the next 15, 20 years within our lifetime. So, it really is clear. And it's interesting you talk about place. I've recently been having some conversations about how community, I remember years ago when you would know all your neighbours and you'd know all your community, and that stopped for a long time. And actually within COVID, I think, getting to know your neighbours again, getting to know your community, and that's really sort of come back again, and it's been a good change to see.
Absolutely. So absolutely. So I think COVID has sort of clearly sort of resulted in this sort of shift back to the local level.
Yeah.
And I think in recent decades, our societies, certainly here in the UK, in a lot of developed places, has become increasingly individualistic. It was kind of like the neoliberal sort of mindset, I suppose. Really, sort of it was it was the focus shifted from the community to the individual, and to tackle climate change, we absolutely need to sort of reconnect with our roots, reconnect with our communities, with the natural world around us, realizing that we're part of nature, we're not separate to it, and so there's a huge sort of point then around sort of that the need for reconnection.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier on in our discussion about your work with the Rainforest Trust, and I know you're heavily involved in biodiversity. Can I ask, I understand why, but obviously for my listeners, why biodiversity? What do you think, how do you think that relates to climate change?
Yeah, I mean, so this is an area that's starting to get a lot of attention. I think the fact that it's only starting to get a lot of attention kind of shows that says something quite profound, really, because biodiversity is about the the variability, the variety of life, the connectivity of life, and how we're all connected, and we've kind of lost sight of that. I mean, it's no coincidence that ecology and economy have the same root, because in ancient Greece, that concept, that oikos concept, was of the sort of the household, the family living in an area connected to the natural world, connecting to the household. Everything was kind of connected, and we I think in our ever more urban lifestyles, we've kind of lost sight of that sort of ancient truth, really, if you like. A lot of us have not thought much about the environment. We thought of it as something like marginal, something over there somewhere, but obviously actually we rely on the natural world for everything. All of our food, drink, the sort of raw materials, everything, it all comes from the natural world. So the biodiversity then is sort of about the connectivity of the natural world, and of which we're a part. And so I suppose it's the need to sort of relearn that, really, that we're embedded within sort of the natural world, not sort of separate to it. I think that's sort of a fundamental point, really. So when it comes to climate change, climate change and biodiversity, these are all sort of obviously connected to our sort of planetary systems. So it's not possible to effectively tackle the climate crisis without at the same time tackling biodiversity loss. I mean, there have been a lot of studies that have looked at the potential of nature-based solutions to contribute to the Paris targets, Paris Agreement targets, and roughly sort of a large part, sort of 25 to 40%, I think, of the solutions are sort of nature-based solutions, and obviously on top of that, despite all of our technological wizardry and ingenuity, up until this point, we haven't had a significant impact at all in terms of removing emissions from the atmosphere. Yes, there are these sort of promising technologies which going forward may become important, but up until this point, that hasn't been the case. But our natural assets, like our forests, peatlands, the ocean, they've been absorbing around about half of our carbon pollution each year for us, and for free. So nature has been doing a great deal of the job for us. So it just sort of shows that it's absolutely fundamental that we conserve the remaining natural assets. That's fundamental to obviously tackling sort of problems connected to biodiversity loss, but also for tackling climate change, because right now it's sort of it's removing around half of our pollutions annually.
Yeah, Richard, I could honestly listen to you all day. You're so interesting and fascinating to listen to. So, but I always ask this very last question. Is there anybody that inspires you in environment, in sustainability space?
Well, there are lots of people. So it would be a long list, really. Yeah, so maybe I won't sort of single out a single person. I think there are so many people that are doing really great things. Obviously we could look at someone like so David Attenborough, who's been championing this for many decades now and still going strong in his 90s. So clearly that's phenomenal. But I think there are many people that are doing great work. But it's clear that the scale of the challenge requires everyone to sort of be contributing to the solutions. It's great to see that many young people are very sort of passionate about these topics. I think that's fantastic to see how we can see how there's a lot of momentum now, but it's clear that in a few years' time, that's only going to be magnified when today's students have joined the workforce. So I think that's encouraging. So it'll be. So we're sort of expanding very quickly. We're looking for more people to join us, and clearly this is a real growth area.
It really is,
yeah. So it'll be great to see more people getting involved, which is what we need.
Yes, good. Well, thank you for your time. As I say, I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I held a little bit back, so hopefully we speak again, and I really appreciate your time, so thank you very much.
Pleasure. Great talking to you, Sam. Yeah.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.